Well, friends, welcome for those just joining. I saw your screens come on. Very exciting topic for us this evening. The title this evening is called Seeking Justice. How can the Baha'i vision of the three protagonists, that is the individual, the community, and the institutions, improve access to justice in our society? What can the Baha'i model of community development offer society as it tries to support those seeking justice? So that's our exciting topic for this evening. Sandra Smith is a teacher, a lawyer, and entrepreneur. She has worked in Ontario and Israel in the fields of education and law for over 30 years, with experiences that have ranged from English as a second language instruction to Baha'i pilgrimage, to commercial and real estate property negotiation and litigation. Committed to serving her community, she has spearheaded projects in not-for-profit housing, Baha'i administration, and curriculum development. Currently, she's a professor at Durham College, where she coordinates the Law Clerk program. She teaches paralegal candidates, and she assists clients at the Durham Community Legal Clinic. She intends to complete her master's thesis, a study in the role of education in improving access to justice in 2023. And her greatest pride is her family. So that's her bio. And I'm glad she put the last line in there because I am part of Sandy's family. I have a sense that Sandy's greatest pride is not exactly her sister-in-law and maybe more her husband and children, but hey, I'll take it, Sandy.
You're right up there. They're
Yeah.
all even. Everybody is equally important to me. But I do have my beloved grandson behind me. So I don't know if you can, I don't know if you can see that.
Wonderful.
Good
Sandy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It is truly a pleasure to see so many faces that are new to me, dear souls that I have not had the bounty to meet in person yet. But mixed in there is a sprinkling of wonderful faces that are very dear to me, and you all know who you are. And I'm so glad to have you here with me tonight. So everyone, I would love that we could all be together in one place, but it is a magical thing that we have now, this technology that allows us to pull friends from all over the planet. However, I think I had sort of forgotten that when I prepared this talk. So if my examples, if my comments, if my statistics are all a little bit too focused on Ontario, Canada for you, then I really do invite you, everyone, to go and explore the situation in your own neighborhood, in your own cluster, to see if you can find any comparable information that will help you. But as Maureen said a few minutes before the talk started, because this talk leans so heavily on the writings of Baha'u'llah Abdu'l-Baha and the guidance of the House of Justice, it is applicable everywhere in the world. So I hope everybody finds something that they can take away from our discussion tonight. I didn't play around with it very much, but let me see if I can share my screen, if that's okay. No, this isn't what I want to share. Hold on, everybody. I should have tried this out first.
That other one looked good too, Sandy.
Sorry?
The other one looked good too.
It is going to look really good. I'm just not wanting to share this one. I want to share the other one. I don't know why it's doing this to me.
Was that Vita saying something nice about someone?
That's a very strange thing for Vita to do, right? All right, friends. So I want to know, what are you seeing? Are you seeing the stones balanced on a piece of wood?
Nothing. Nothing.
Nothing. Okay, great.
Seeing
that makes
you.
it very.
Happy with that.
How about now?
Yeah. That's a cool structure, Sandy.
Wonderful. Okay, let's see if I've got if I'm moving around here. No, not moving around. Why? You know, friends, I do this every day, teach on Zoom. So it's just not happy with me tonight. Let me try one more time. Sorry. Let's try one more time. Yeah, it's not moving around. All right, so when in doubt, close the program and reopen the program, right?
Sandy, do you want to send it to me as a backup?
No, I'm gonna get this working. Slideshow, play from start. All right, let's just see. There we go. It seems to be working on my end. Let's just see if we can help get it to work on your end. Try one more time. Okay. Yes?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, lovely.
Good, Sandy.
Friends, you know, the title of this talk is Seeking Justice. And the reason I chose that is that I've been doing some work over the past year and a half, looking at access to justice in Canada and in Ontario, and then more broadly in common law jurisdictions. So for those of you that don't have a law background, there are different visions of how law is brought into being in a context. And one of the most widely spread ways in which a justice system is structured in the non-Baha'i world is the common law system. So those of you in Australia, Singapore, although we don't have Singapore here, I'm not sure about Malaysia, but North America and England will know that we have this system called the common law. And it is, it's a very convoluted, very complex, very terrifying, very overwhelming system. But more and more, there are calls for that system to reach out, to embrace, and to really meet the needs of individuals who are seeking justice in our communities. When we think of the justice system, though, we frequently imagine justice as a woman, yes, with a blindfold on, and she's holding a balance, right, a scale. So I chose this image, and I wanted to ask everybody: do you see a balance here? Do you see how we have the possibility that the heavier stones might tip off on one end, and the small stone at one side might flip off into the nether world? Yes, everybody understands. So what does it mean to you when you see this image and you think about justice? Tell me, everyone. You can go in the chat, or you can just come on and let me know what you think. I, of course, can't see the chat, so Maureen, you're on to tell me if anything wonderful and interesting comes in.
It doesn't look very equal.
It doesn't look very equal. Yes. Would you say that might be a comment that you might want to say about the justice system? It's not very equal. It's not distributed evenly.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a comment that says it's lopsided.
It's lopsided. Yeah.
It seems like it's often justice is portrayed to us that it is fair and that it is balanced, but in reality, it isn't.
It isn't. Yes.
A comment in the chat that says unfair.
Unfair. So these are entirely
It says unjust, if that's a difference.
Unjust. Well, it is different, but both comments are valid. You know, friends, it is interesting to me that when I was just playing around with putting the graphics in this presentation, this came up. And as so often happens when you read the writings and you look at something, you see it differently. And I have to say, I'd never seen it differently until I was invited to give this talk and I was preparing for it. Does anybody see that there are three active components to this picture? Because when I looked at it for years, I always saw one side balancing against another. And frequently we describe our justice system as being adversarial, one side versus another. But we're going to talk tonight about the three protagonists of the plan. And when I look at this picture now, I see that there are actually three. There are three components. There are three spaces that have influence, that can decide what will happen in this picture. So of course we have the 4 stones piled up on one side, and we have the 1 stone on the other side. But then we have the 3rd stone, which is the fulcrum, right? Which is what, depending on where you place that stone, right? The balance might come out even, or it might tip one way or the other. And so it is really interesting to me then when we think about the 3 protagonists of the plan, if we think about the fact that they are in a dynamic relationship with each other. And depending on the strength of one, the weight of another, the placement of a third, right? We may achieve balance, or we may end up with a system that is unjust, unfair, out of balance. So let's talk a little bit about that tonight. And what I'd like us to do is talk about it in terms of housing, right? Let's read this passage from Baha'u'llah. Would anyone like to read it for me, or shall I read it?
I can read it.
Please.
Build ye for yourselves such houses as the rain and floods can never destroy, which shall protect you from the changes and chances of this life. This is the instruction of him whom the world hath wronged and forsaken. Baha'u'llah.
Dear friends, why would the Blessed Beauty tell us to build houses for ourselves that will protect us from the changes and chances of this life? Why would he enjoin that upon us? Why does he want us to have houses, friends?
So we can be edified.
Yes. Because if we don't have a house, what happens to us?
No protection, no safety.
No protection, no safety. Yes.
We're out in the open.
Yes. Exposed. Yes. Friends, one of the most powerful things we have in this faith is a Baha'i home. What does a home give us, friends?
Security.
Yes.
A feeling of warmth, of welcome.
Yes. Friends, we are asked to conduct an endless number of home visits. Why aren't we just all visiting in cafes? What is it about home visits that's so particularly special, so particularly powerful?
That says love and unity.
Yes.
Hospitality.
Hospitality. Yes. Service to others. Sure.
The home is where the heart is.
The heart. Absolutely. Anybody else? Do we all remember that wonderful quotation by Abdul Baha? My home is the home of peace, right? Of laughter, of exaltation, right? It's the place in which you get to create that world that we're all dreaming of. You know, the changes and chances of life can be soul destroying, but a home, right? A house can be soul invigorating, right? It can be a place where the individual can learn and grow and soar, right? It can be the place where the community is welcomed, right? Where we can build those bonds of friendship. And of course, it can be, as it is for most of us, the place where we have our institution meetings, right? Where the LSA is welcomed. So it serves so many different purposes, right? Let's look at a quote from Abdul Baha now. Anybody want to read this one for me?
I can read it.
Sure.
From Al-Baha, the promulgation of universal peace. The rich will enjoy the economic condition as well as the poor. For they will not be able to accumulate so much as to be burdened by its management, while the poor will be relieved from the stress of want and misery. The rich will enjoy his palace, and the poor will have his comfortable cottage.
So here again, we see sort of, it almost is a balancing here that we're talking about, but Abdul Baha, if you remember from reading the promulgation of universal peace, is talking about what a Baha'i world might look like. A world in which there is equity, there is balance, but reminding us that it's not necessarily the same, right? So there will be a control on the extremities of rich and poor, but some people will live in palaces and some people will live in cottages. But at the heart of it, I mean, each individual will have that space that Baha'u'llah talked about, where we are protected, right, from the changes and chances of life, where we can welcome others into our home. Maybe it's only one other because our home is very small. Maybe it's 100 others, but it's a home, it's a house, it's our sanctuary, but it's also our gift to our community and to our institutions. It's a profoundly spiritual connection to the concept of a home, friends. And so with that in mind, then, I want to share this with you, that of all of the G7 countries, right, so these are the wealthiest economies on the planet, Canada has the lowest amount of housing per the population. We are facing a grave situation here in Canada, and it's a grave situation across the world, right? The lack of housing, but keenly so here in Canada. And I'll look at maybe a few reasons, but of course, I want to highlight the fact that we are a rapidly growing country. The last I heard, there are about 2 million people in the line to actually enter Canada as immigrants. And so what is already a challenging situation for all of those that don't have that home, that sanctuary, that place that they can go to, it's only going to become worse. This statistic comes from the report of the Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force, which was a task force put together to report to the provincial government. So in Canada, we have provinces, and Ontario is the largest, it's most populous. Well, I don't know, maybe it's neck and neck with Quebec, but it's a pretty big place, okay? And so for this task force was put together to look at this critical issue in our society. The report then went on to say specifically that Ontario is in a housing crisis, right? The average price for a house across Ontario was $923,000 at the end of 2021, less than 6 months ago. 10 years ago, the average price was $329,000. Right? So over that period, average house prices have climbed 180%, while average incomes have grown roughly 38%. I was particularly struck by this statistic, and it spoke to me because, as many of you know, I actually went to the Holy Land in 2011. And so when I left, prices were around $329,000 for an average home. And I came back and I almost couldn't breathe, friends, the transformation in that 10 years. And as somebody who was seeking a home, coming back into this space, it really shocked me. For those of us that have been living in Ontario for many years, I know that the challenge to find a place to live, the cost of finding a place to live, has never really left our mind, but perhaps we didn't realize just how radically it changed while I was away. And you can't blame me for that, friends. I wasn't here, wasn't me, okay? I also put up an infographic for you, which is also quite sobering. It's about homelessness in Canada. And so I hope that you can begin to see that I'm looking at all aspects of what it means to have a home. So from buying a home, we'll talk about renting homes, and we'll talk about what it means when you don't have the money for either one of them. And so if you'd like me to send you these documents that I'm quoting, and it's hard to see on the slide here, this infographic about homelessness, but I particularly wanted to just to show you, you can sort of see the graph at the bottom and the radical change over time. And then in the bottom sort of orange box, it talks about the fact that homelessness itself may be a problem, and it's particularly difficult for us to ascertain how many people don't have a place to live, or as you'll see there, there's unsheltered people, really have nowhere to live. And then there are people that are sleeping on people's couches. So it's hidden homelessness. They actually have a roof over their house, but it's a temporary stopgap measure, and they tend to be moving quite a bit. So that's an issue itself, but of course, that leads to many other socioeconomic and health challenges. And I will just touch briefly on those as we go through. So what I'm doing in my work is that I am training individuals to work in the justice system. And I'm looking at how the justice system is using the resources that I'm training in order to deal with a variety of issues. So a very broad statistic that I'll give you, so over and above or inclusive of housing, but beyond housing, is that at any given 3-year period in Canada, 50% of Canadians are engaged in some sort of legal dispute. They have some sort of justice problem. This, everyone, is just civil justice, just for those that don't want to know the difference. On top of that are criminal charges, okay? But you can see that it's an enormous percentage of the population. And in that 3-year period then, right, you can see that as we go 3 years to 3 years to 3 years, it ends up that almost everybody in Canada faces some sort of a legal dispute in their life. And of those people, 7%, everyone, access the justice system. So somewhere, and it's very hard to tie these numbers down, but somewhere between 70 and 90% of issues are unresolved, right? They do not come to the justice system. There is no justice for these individuals, right? What we know, Dr. Farrows and Dr. Jacobs have conducted a very lengthy study, and they tell us that 65% of Canadians with legal problems don't know what their rights are. They don't know how to deal with their legal problems, and they're afraid to access the legal system or think nothing can be done. And so, as I said, there's a great deal of work that's been done in how insecure housing leads to family breakdown, leads to consumer debt, and then circles right back around to insecure housing. And all of that disproportionately affects those of us that are marginalized. And we in the Baha'i community have a very diverse community. And so many of us come from immigrant backgrounds, and immigrants, of course, suffer greatly because they cannot access justice and they cannot access sufficient housing. So I thought I would give you this statistic here, everyone. So this is just one tribunal, but it's a tribunal dedicated to housing in Ontario. This is the Landlord and Tenant Board. So in Ontario, we have a piece of legislation called the Residential Tenancies Act, and it's meant to help those who are renting. So we touched briefly on those who want to buy but can't because the prices are so astronomically high. We touched on those that are homeless, right, who really don't have the resources to even attempt to rent a home. But this is meant to talk about those that are in rental accommodation, right? And so you might notice that the LTB applications, so an application is a formal document that You bring before the tribunal to say, hey, I have a problem. Can you help me? And you can see that in 2019, 82,000 people came forward and said, I have a problem. 2019 was 80,000 and 2020 was 48,000. Does anyone tell me what's going on? Are things just getting so much better in Ontario that fewer and fewer people are having trouble finding housing? Anybody?
I guess people have just given up.
Unfortunately, sadly, that is in many ways the correct answer. Yeah. Anything else that people want to say? Any other reason why people would not be looking for help from the justice system when it comes to helping them to have a home or to keep a home?
Maybe fear of the unknown, or
Absolutely. 100%. People are very afraid. There are other studies that have looked at this. Of course, 2020 is the beginning of the pandemic. And in case you didn't know, many of the courts closed, many of the tribunals closed for months at that time. So that certainly had an effect. Okay. But I'm here to tell you that the numbers still are shockingly low. So if you take the statistics I've given you so far, that only 7% of the people come forward, right, to deal with their matters, right? And if we want to say on average, it's a 7% in each of the areas, roughly. And then we see almost a halving of that in the last 2 years, right? Fewer and fewer and fewer people are coming to get help from this system that we've created. It's for me, it's terrifying, friends. It's really
it shows they have no faith in the government.
There's no faith in the government. There's no faith in the system. And so as a result, these people are living precarious lives in which they are, unable to find somewhere to raise a family.
Lives of quiet desperation.
Lives of quiet desperation, yes. So Dr. Curry has done an extensive study of this as well. And so just to give you a little bit more information, forgive me if I've repeated this, I'm not sure if I have, but self-represented litigants then. So these are people who actually do find the courage to come forward and say, I want the system to work for me, but I can't afford help. I need help, but I can't afford it. I can't afford a lawyer or a paralegal, or I don't even know who to go to. So they were asked, right, if they felt that the resolution of their legal issues would have been better if they'd had some help. 42% yes, please. We'd really like some help, right? And when asked what kind of help they wanted, they said, can I just have some better information? 80% said more information. 68% said someone just explain things to me and help me a little bit with the forms. And almost 70% said, we want somebody to advocate for us, but not necessarily a lawyer or somebody with legal training, right? I mean, we just want somebody who knows just maybe a little bit more than us, but who can walk with us and help us. So with that as a context then, friends, I thought we could return to some of the writings. And I wanted us to look again at promulgation of universal peace. Well, first of all, actually, before we go to are there any questions about any of the statistics I've laid out? I can go a little bit more deeply into it if you need help. We're okay? Please feel free to ask questions. Stop me at any time. Okay. Can someone read this quotation from Abdu'l Baha for me then?
I can. Although the body politic is one family, yet because of lack of harmonious relations, some members are comfortable and some in direst misery. Some members are satisfied and some are hungry. Some members are clothed in most costly garments, and some families are in need of food and shelter. Why? Because this family lacks the necessary reciprocity and symmetry. This household is not well arranged. This household is not living under a perfect law. All the laws which are legislated do not ensure happiness. They do not provide comfort.
I'm always amazed at how well, how Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah, the Bab, they just go right to the core of the problem, you know, right? There's no balance. It's out of balance. There's no symmetry. There's no beauty in the system. And because there's no beauty, it's not perfection, right? And I was amazed again when I was reading this quotation, the reference to a household. So here, household is being used as an image, right? In other words, our global household. But it was the word jumped out at me again, right? This reference to the importance of a house, a space where we feel safe. And the legal system is not providing that. It's not what it should be. It's not what Abdu'l-Baha asks or tells us that we need. So then, friends, if we look at the three different groups that we're going to talk about tonight, the three protagonists, but let's look at them, first of all, from a secular perspective, not from the perspective of what has been explained to us by the House of Justice. But if we look at the individual and we think of the individual as somebody who's precariously housed, and that could be anyone, from the person who's sleeping out on the street in -20 degrees, and friends, right up to people on this call, or, you know, right up, you know, to individuals who live in magnificent homes, but who have extraordinary mortgages. And, you know, it's going to just take a couple of more, elevations in the interest rate. And these friends will have to sell and move, right? They just they're precarious, right? It's not solid. It's not that place, that haven that it's supposed to be. Okay, so it's frankly the majority of people in Ontario. We look at the institutions, and I've mentioned just briefly the Landlord and Tenant Board, but that's just one example, one part of the legal system. But the legal system is also just one part of the political system, the societal system that we have, right? So all of those institutions. And again, if we think about that balance, and we're always weighing the individual against the institutions, okay? And frequently we feel that the individual gets, you know, squashed, and the institutions are somehow continue to thrive, even though they may not be meeting the needs of those that they're supposed to serve. So then remember, there was the third one, right? There's the fulcrum. And if we think about that as the community, who belongs in that box, everyone? So if the individual is one protagonist and the institutions are not, who's the community? What is the community? Anybody want to tell me?
The bedrock.
It's a bedrock. Ooh, that's a wonderful. Imagine if the community were a very long piece of stone, right? Then the fulcrum would be very firm, very, very secure, and lifting up the institutions and lifting up the individuals equally. What a beautiful image that is.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? What do you think the community is? Well, you know, I'm going to have the House of Justice tell us. Thank God for the House of Justice to be able to give us some answers. But I want us to think about this, right? This is the secular vision that you might want to say has pushed the community to one side and the equation and doesn't have that third part in the discussion. But I'm here to tell you it's incredibly exciting for me that the work that I'm doing has identified this as something that needs to be raised up, right? A really strong community upon which the individual and the institution can thrive, okay? So let's talk about the three protagonists. Let's just remind ourselves about this. And this is a magnificent paragraph for me from the Universal House of Justice, March 2013, to the believers in Iran. Would someone like to read this one for me?
Sure, I can read.
Thank you, dear one. Nice to see you.
I'm just sitting off camera listening.
Okay.
This brings us at last to the specific question of political activity. The conviction of the Baha'i community that humanity, having passed through earlier stages of social evolution, stands at the threshold of its collective maturity. Its belief that the principle of the oneness of humankind, the hallmark of the age of maturity, implies a change in the very structure of society. Its dedication to a learning process that, animated by this principle, explores the workings of a new set of relationships among the individual, the community, and the institutions of society, the three protagonists in the advancement of civilization. Its confidence that a revised conception of power, freed from the notion of dominance with the accompanying ideas of contest, contention, division, and superiority, underlies the desired set of relationships. Its commitment to a vision of a world that, benefiting from humanity's rich cultural diversity, abides no lines of separation. These all constitute essential elements of the framework that shapes the Baha'i approach to politics set out in the brief below.
My heart starts pounding when I read that. It's so it's so life altering, everyone, and it really reminds us, that the three protagonists are the source, the vehicle, right, for the advancement of civilization, right? It's going to free us from the notion of dominance, right? Free us from contest, contention, division, and superiority, and create that desired set of relationships, right? That system, that dynamic system with the pieces working together, right? That will benefit humanity's rich cultural diversity and abide no lines of separation. And when I see it again through the lens of the work that I do, and I watch how out of balance the system is, and then therefore how dangerous and how ineffective the system is, and then I'm reminded, okay, so we just need to make sure that we've got all three of those spaces. And for the House of Justice to talk about this in terms of political activity, we sometimes shy away from wanting to be involved in politics because we're fearful that we might get caught up in some sort of a political debate, right? But the House of Justice is telling us that if we can come to understand the relationship of the three protagonists, and if we can give that to the world, it is what's going to make a real change. So December 2015, the House then said, and I just pulled out one sentence, it talked about this a shared spirit of collaboration among the plan's three protagonists, right? The individual, the community, and the institutions. This spirit was the prerequisite for every important undertaking. And so I want us to always have in our mind that this, everything I say tonight could be just words. Everything that was written could be just ink on paper, but it's the spirit. It's the spirit that animates, that gives the power that we need in creating this beautiful system. So friends, I'm aware of the fact that it's 10 to 8. What I have here then are 3 paragraphs or 3 sections from the December 2010 message, one that talks about the individual, one talks about the community, one that talks about the institutions. But I don't know, I don't want to take everyone's time. If you feel we have the time, we can read through these together, and you can share with me any inspiration that you draw from this and share with each other. That would be lovely. Or we can stop here. What would you like to do, friends?
Sandy, we definitely have more time to
Okay,
listen
good.
to your expertise. So
Great.
maybe there's an excerpt we can read, or if
Yes.
you wanted to summarize them in your words, we can leave
Yeah.
that up to you.
Well, so I would like us then, so this is, you'll remember, this is the series of paragraphs where the House of Justice in 2010 talked about the individual and the institutions in the community. And you can see that I've highlighted that this is the section about the individual. The House of Justice draws on magnificent quotations from the writings, talking about the fact that, we should see ourselves always as servants of God, that while we may be considering ourselves, right, we have to recognize that there's an abundance of goodwill and of effort that needs to be expended by the individual on others. Okay, and so Abdu'l-Baha says, with heart and soul, the friends from the directives of their institutions the directives of their institutions, so that Abdu'l-Baha explains things may be properly ordered and well arranged. Okay, so then I'll move on, right? So following that, then the House talks about the institutions, draws us to the writings of the Guardian. Okay, and I'll just read in the middle there where it says, with extreme humility, right? These are the individuals placed in these positions, whether through election or appointment. They approach their tasks and endeavor by their open-mindedness, their high sense of justice and duty, their candor, their modesty, their entire devotion to the welfare and interests of the friends, the cause, and humanity, to win not only the confidence and the genuine support and respect of those they serve, but also their esteem and real affection. I can't imagine what our justice system would look like, friends, if those in the institutions really, just had even real affection. Let's forget about everything else that I just read, just had real affection for those who come to them with these, these enormous barriers in their lives. What may seem, minimal to us, right? You can't pay, your rent for 2 or 3 months. Okay, oh, well, I'll just go borrow it from a family member or something. These individuals come and they are on the edge of losing their homes. Or we could flip it the other way. And we could say, okay, here's a lovely person who owns a home and has decided to rent out a basement apartment and needs that income from that basement apartment to make the mortgage payment so that they too can have a home. And so they're sharing their assets, they're giving somebody else a home, but they need that money. And so they go to the justice system and say, I need payment and rent for my place. And what it would be like if there was this genuine support and real affection for these individuals. And we don't see it. And I don't think the rest of those of us in Ontario see it either. So then I actually wanted us to have a discussion specifically about community. I think you can tell that I've wanted to focus on community for the majority of this talk. And I specifically didn't bring it up at this point, but so far I've been talking about community in general. Here, of course, the House of Justice is talking about the community of the greatest name, right? So what is it that the community of the greatest name, right, spiritually, becomes in that spiritually charged arena, right? What is it that there's unique about that community? What can we learn about that community? What can we learn about community building that we can then offer to others? So I'd like to just read the quotation here by Abdu'l-Baha. He says, When any souls grow to be true believers, they will attain a spiritual relationship with one another and show forth a tenderness which is not of this world. They will, all of them, become elated from a draught of divine love. And that union of theirs, that connection, will also abide forever. Souls, that is, who will consign their own selves to oblivion, strip from themselves the defects of humankind, and unchain themselves from human bondage, will beyond any doubt be illumined with the heavenly splendors of oneness, and will all attain unto real union in the world that dieth not. So everyone, what the heck does that mean? What on earth, what does that community look like? Because we're trying to build it. And what could it look like when it's offered as a gift to the rest of humanity?
I'm saying to myself, very lofty ideals.
Mm.
I don't think we see community as this arena for powers that are multiplied in unified action.
Mm.
It says we'll show forth tenderness that is not of this world. And it truly, the image you have is basically as close as you can imagine to perfection. And sadly, we don't see that very often.
Yeah.
If
I
you
love
had
it. Sorry.
the opportunity to pioneer and be in a community so full of love that you really do become a family. I had that experience when I pioneered in the Caribbean in St.
Yes.
Thomas, and
Yeah.
it really was, there was so much joy and safety and assumptions that we would accomplish amazing things, and back then we did.
Yes. Yes. I particularly love, and in line with that, we unchain ourselves from human bondage, right? We release our potential. We rise on the shoulders of giants, right? When we have a community. Any other ideas, friends, about community? All right, so then maybe you can look at this picture now and you can tell me, I love that image that was given to us before where the community was broad and flat, right? And was the whole length of the balance there of the board. But I mean, are there other images that you can or other concepts that come out now when you look at this image, when you think of it as having three parts, not just two sides?
The individual, the institutions, and the community on the bottom.
Yeah. And for me as a lawyer,
that you used for the bottom piece,
the fulcrum. Yeah. The fulcrum. It's just, again, we think of justice about weighing one side against the other, right? But I really feel that that's not, and I don't presume to say that I know what Baha'i justice is, but I don't think that it's about, weighing power. I have to say that justice, I think, is so much more complicated, so much more powerful when you think of it in terms of the three protagonists and the role that each one will play. Are there any comments, friends? Any questions? Have I frightened everybody by? Sorry?
I really like this image that you've put up, because in my mind, I see if you move the bottom, any of these pieces, even so slightly, it's disastrous. Everything falls apart. So the coordination, it's not about dominance and, feeling superior. It's really about being in step and coordinating. And I guess you could say that spirit of unity is so important. There isn't like any little room for movement in this balance act.
And again, on that theme, so if one side it gets any weaker, or frankly, the other way, it gets any heavier because they need more care, or they need more time, or they need more resources, again, the whole system becomes unstable.
And I'm thinking it's a prettier picture to remove the 2 stones at the top and put them onto the 1 stone, and then move the fulcrum a little bit over, to make it look a more perfect balance.
Yes. So to have the symmetry that Abdul Baha was talking about. Yeah.
I have a question. I want to ask how Baha'is as individual, because we cannot change that much whole the society or the government or this sort of things. How as individual we can help to build up this kind of pyramid?
So again, I'm going to just speak about the example that I gave tonight, right? There's so much need for help with housing. And I'm not asking people to open their homes and have them come in, but there are community centers, there are legal clinics, there are all kinds of organizations, church-based, secular organizations that just need volunteers to help somebody to sit and read through a document together, right? Just say, I don't understand this letter that I got from my landlord. Can somebody just help me to understand what it is my landlord wants me to do? Oh, right? Because people get forms and they're terrified and they're put off, and then they don't deal with it. And then the problem just gets worse and worse and worse, right? They just, so much of what we want to do in our community, we have children's classes, for instance, reach out to the parents. Are you okay? Do you need help? I can watch the kids if you need to go to the tribunal. So I think the individual really just needs to look at neighbors, across the street or down the street or in a neighborhood, because believe me, this problem is there. It's in every single neighborhood.
Thank you.
And there is a lot of shame about this, everyone. An enormous amount of fear and guilt and embarrassment that you have a legal problem. Whereas, if somebody had cancer, we'd be like, oh, okay, well, you go to the doctor and you go and then we say prayers for you. And, but when somebody doesn't have the money to pay their rent, it's humiliating. So I think the individual just has to love, just really, really love.
And I think the average person doesn't know who to reach out to, how to get in touch with the community.
Yes.
How do you find that out?
Well, I'm really excited to say that there, and especially in the last 2 years, it's wonderful. Obviously, they were working on it before that, but there are some incredible websites now I can give you, there's one called CLEO, which is the Community Legal Education Ontario site. So sorry, friends, for those of you that aren't in Ontario, but I do know the United States and California has some extraordinarily exciting education programs. I didn't really get into the education side of it. But you know, so much of this comes down to can individuals get the information they need to overcome the problem they have? And so we could have spent another whole hour talking about the implications of the institute process, of what that looks like when we're trying to build skills. And we know that there are already books that are as part of not the main sequence of Ruhi, but other books that help develop skills in other areas. And that model is incredibly powerful. And so it's, there are organizations out there that have that, you know, spaces where 3 or 4 people can come together and get help because they have a shared, not that they each have the same, not that they share the problem, but that they each have a similar problem and they can learn from each other about it. So I work at the Durham Community Legal Clinic, and it's it took a real hit because of COVID. It had to shut down, as did everything else. But we're kind of like, you know, those wonderful daffodils that you see outside right now, just sort of just popping up. And there are many very good people working to build up the community side of legal support. It's early days, everyone, but there are, if you go to Clio, it's a clearinghouse for information, but it also has links to other places as well.
Thank you.
Sandy, I'm seeing in the chat that a few people have had to run, and they've been saying thank you for this wonderful presentation, very enlightening. And I wanted to open the floor, if you don't mind. Is that okay, Sandy? Because you
Please.
kind of already did. In case anyone else has a burning question and has to go. So maybe some time for back and forth here, and I'll probably stop the recording.
Shall I stop sharing now?
Sure.
We've looked at it long enough.